So, okay, thank you very much to joining our event today. This is the last event of the year 2022 for German Language Society. So where is it here? Let's go here. Okay. So herzlich willkommen. As you know, we try to have events every month on the last Thursday at 7:30 or 8:30 for everybody who is based in, well, in the continental Europe. We have our page, which is obviously on Chartered Institute of Linguists Society's page, is German Language Society. And, you know, the events are always listed there or on the main page, but I'm sure you know that. Good news, we have planned for 2023 and we already have 10, well, we decided for 10 events because it's always difficult, and 5 are already ready. So they are with the administration. I hope they will approve everything, but more about that later. We have also quite strict discussion rules, which is actually, you know, be respectful and so on. And we want to, if we speak about a certain topic, we want to stay, you know, in this kind of topic, that we don't jump or, you know, miss, you know, or lose the red file. Today, event number 10, Kaizen or change for the better. Our speaker is Greg Sturmer, who is, you know, you can already see him. He will explain us everything about Kaizen in 30 minutes, as much as he can. And then we will have open discussion. One thing that we always do at our events is that we try to discuss or, you know, communicate and network. So you're super welcome to ask questions, or you can type them in chat, or, you know, whatever makes you feel comfortable. So who is Greg? Greg was one of the first people who worked with traceability and fashion. And to achieve his goals, he used the Kaizen method. And now he will be very angry because I wrote that Kaizen originates from Japan and is a way to improve continuously. So he will correct me here. And in 2000, he was called the father of traceability and a strong advocate of organic and environmentally friendly fashion. But these days, Greg is a coach, digital marketer, and public speaker worldwide. That's him. I'll just read the first sentence, which is really important. In Kaizen, it doesn't matter where you start. This may sound trite or counterintuitive, but it is essential for successful team building and will define the team's ultimate power and unity. So I will kind of stop here. I see that we have still a lot of colleagues waiting, and I would like to pass my word, you know, to Greg. So if you can take over, introduce yourself, tell us what we have to know, and we'll listen, and then we'll see.
Okay, so just quickly before I share my screen, hello to everybody. Nice to see you tonight. I was actually the first person to put a traceable system into an entire supply chain from under the animal through to the shopper, and then put that system into a shop in LA to sell fashion. It hadn't been done before. It was a very huge change, and I'll actually reference it in the talk a little later, but I won't get too deep into it. It was about 12 years work, and we've got 30 minutes, so I'm doing it. So the purpose of tonight is just to introduce the systems that were behind that, and perhaps find a way to use them. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that will go well. Let's do that one and share it. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
I'll assume you can. Perfect. Okay, so basically when Romana asked me to do the talk, because she'd seen me talking before a number of times, I did a little bit of research on SEAL, and I thought, well, I wonder what would actually be useful to the people listening. And obviously this is your society, and thank you for inviting me. And I thought maybe Kaizen, the actual philosophy behind what I was doing, would be interesting to talk about and might make a good subject for conversation. So if we start with what is Kaizen really, and we start with the dictionary definition that you're seeing, it's quite interesting because it's a business philosophy. It's a system of making positive changes and making them on a regular basis so that you can improve productivity or quality. And that sounds terribly dry, doesn't it? And it's also an approach to your personal and social life that focuses on continually improving your relationships and yourself. Now, that might be more interesting as well. But what I thought I would do for the talk was I would actually go back into the history of Kaizen. It's about 100 years. It's close to 100 years now. And coming through the way the business community put it back in and how it circumnavigated the world and came back would then allow us to kind of see how I got involved in it. And we would then look at how I applied it in terms of that change that I mentioned before. And then to finish the talk, well, I thought it might be interesting to literally apply it. And perhaps you have a little think about some system that you might like to improve as a society or something you like to improve personally. And we'll have a run through that and see how we can actually apply this quickly and easily to a real situation. So I thought I'd start with how many people think Kaizen is a Japanese system. I won't ask you to put it in the chat or anything. Just think to yourself, is Kaizen a Japanese system? And the answer, of course, is no. In fact, it has its roots in America. And it was a statistician called Walter Shewhart who was working at the Bell Telephone Company at the time. Now, linguists will know that if I say give you a bell in England, I mean call you. It's the same as if I clean my house with a Hoover. They were brand names that became commonplace words in England. And what Walter Shewhart developed was a statistical process control system. Again, very dry, but what he was basically saying was figuring out processes, any kind of processes, manufacturing processes particularly, and understanding them from a statistical point of view. So you would look and try and understand the process. Then you would try and see what the limits on the process were, and those limits might be financial, they might be educational, they might be technological, but you'd look at them. And then you try and make the process stable. And what stable means in that context is you'd make the process something that was repeatable and predictable. And you do that by removing irregular causes of variation. I mean, there are a number of things that can be irregular causes, distractions, light, sound, earthquakes, whatever it is that you can remove. And then you would monitor this process so that you had a continuing record of how the process was performing. And that's really what Walter Shewhart looked at. And he started with control sheets and things like that. And a little bit later on, in 1927, he met a man called William Deming, who was a management consultant, who looked at Walter Shewhart's work, and thought, you know what, I can apply that more widely. So he took the original statistical work. He was a statistician himself as well. And he applied it, and he published his own management theory on the back of it, which, of course, reciprocally found its way to Shewhart, and they became friends, and they discussed what it was that they were trying to do with processes. And in 1937, Walter Shewhart actually published a set of papers, 4 of them it was, and William Deming translated them and produced a book called Statistical Method and Viewpoint of Quality Control. And I'm not going to get into the idea of that book, but that's where the original ideas start. And if you look at the time, 1937, this is just in time to kind of 1939 attract the US military. And the US military then decided, oh, this is interesting, because what's going to happen is that the war is going to break out and we're going to need to be technological. And the reason that's fascinating is because during the Second World War, the technological development of manufacturing accelerated to the kind of speed we're kind of used to now with the technology advances we see. And if you took the 2 statisticians' works and then added a teacher called Charles Allen from Massachusetts, who was a vocational teacher. So he was basically teaching adults how to do things for work. He was teaching people in work how to do things. And you combine these together, you come up with a program that the American military funded called Training Within Industry. And this was a supply side program, and the American military had basically decided that they could win the war by producing better bombs more often, more accurately, those kind of things. And that was for the war effort. And what Alan did was produce this educational process called show, tell, do, check, right? Show, tell, do, check. If you look in an American school today, you'll see that the children are still doing show and tell. And the do and check morphed. So eventually these 4 stages became plan, do, check, and act. And anyone who's got a current software background at the moment, or anyone who's doing any development of technology, will understand that as a cyclic system that's developed particularly in things like user experience and particularly in user interfaces. Now, this is very dry, and I will come on to this, but it won't hurt to have a little look at this 4-stage training system that actually managed to combine essentially what William Denning had written in his management and what Charles Allen did with training. And they came together. So the first part of it was job instruction. And we call that today training the trainers. So it teaches managers and experienced workers how to train inexperienced workers quickly and accurately. Okay, so we call that training the trainers now. And what the idea is, you carve up everything into small, digestible elements. And you then provide learning whilst doing, again, a very, very common concept these days, but in a particular order that allows the inexperienced worker to become experienced. Now, if you haven't worked in manufacturing, you will still have come across this process in the modern world, because it's called onboarding these days. But unfortunately, these days, they've kind of forgotten what it was all about. And onboarding is not a formal process so much these days. And most managers aren't trained in onboarding as a train the trainer system before they get new people. So it's largely been kind of forgotten where the origin came from. The second part of the program was to teach the worker, this is interesting, how to evaluate the process they were doing methodically and objectively. So in fact, it was empowering the worker to be able to report correctly on their process in a way that the executive could execute in an executable manner. And it encouraged the worker to be the owner of the changes that they were promoting. So this then kind of helped with loyalty. It increased a flat hierarchy, and it removed the opportunity for the boss or the supervisor to take credit for the workers' jobs. It was very positive and stayed in Japanese culture pretty much up to the current day. The third element people were trained in was job relations. And obviously that is simply to get on with the people around you and for the managers to treat people in a fair and effective way. So we have these 3 things. And finally, perhaps one that is also a little bit lost today is the program development courses, where every manager, every trainer was aware of the program that the company was trying to put through, or the manufacturing unit was trying to put through, because the trainer then had teachable moments whilst learning through doing. And because the trainer knew the purpose of the company change program, and because all the managers did, no opportunities for learning or improvement were lost during the training process. So why did they call it Kaizen? Well, actually, what happened was the Training Within Industry program that was set up by Alan had a video. It's as simple as that. And the video was called Improvement in 4 Steps. It was those 4 processes. And if you translate that into Japanese, pardon me for murdering the Japanese, you'll get Kaizen Ino Yon Dankai. And if you cut out, as Westerners tend to, everything after Kaizen, you get Kaizen. Now, Deming was invited to Japan and put there as part of the Marshall Plan. Well, it's not the Marshall Plan, but it's a Japanese equivalent of it, in the 1950s to help rebuild Japanese industry after the war. And in 1950, he added quality circles, which are essentially a way of managing that everybody within a team has cross skills with each other. And this combined then in Toyota to produce something called the Toyota production system that added something called Muda, which we would know as a lean system today, but it just means total eradication of waste, with something we all know as just in time, which is why our supply chains are so fragile these days, why we're having problems, because just in time became everything without stock. And something called Jidoka, which is basically means automation. And that in itself became the basis of what the Kaizen Institute now calls Kaizen. Those things were put together by Toyota into that program. In 1986, a Japanese consultant, Masaki Imai, published a book called Kaizen, the Key to Japan's Competitive Success. And that book was published back in the West. And by 1989, it was a staple, very fashionable, very trendy management system, so trendy that it was in the Open University and in all their effective management courses by 1989. And that's where I came across it first. So it's a long time ago. And what I'll do now is I'll show you, that's more than enough history of the dry stuff of the background, but just to show you how it went out and it came back. What I'll do now is I'll have a little bit more focus on Kaizen, and then I'll show you how it was appropriate for me to use this philosophy for the first time in a big change. So let's have a look at this. Kaizen is continual improvement. We know it's gone round. But why do I like Kaizen? Why did I like Kaizen? Why was it good for me? And the answer is that Kaizen is a very, very universal principle. It's an amazing philosophy because it really does not care where you're starting from. It doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't matter what you know, or pretty much what you believe, because it's all going to come in the process. And that's a very attractive management system when you're trying to effect change. It's a very attractive management system when you have people who perhaps haven't received the same opportunities in education. It's a very attractive management thing because you actually, the requirement is simply to find out where you are when you start. And now if you think about today, even in 2022, we live in this astonishing world where change is almost as fast as it was in wartime, where the technology is literally outdating itself every 5 years, where, it's constantly changing. We need to essentially lifelong learn to keep up to date with those changes in work. And really, the situation is not so dissimilar. So Kaizen, when it's done well, is cheap. That's very good. It's insightful. It's a long-term process, and it creates sustainable success. And if we step through the processes now, the first one is something called getting to the line. You can call it getting to the line. It's essentially the framework inside what you're going to do. And regardless of how you apply this, and we will apply it as the last stage of the talk, you start by mapping out processes. You map out the processes in the chain that you want to change, all of them, in time and in line. And this kind of frame will be the boundaries of the system you know. So let's have a little look at that. If you see this, it's a very boring slide, but it's a set of things. And if you started perhaps from the left here and worked across, if you take the central line as being the production system or the change system, the change engine, if you like, then you can see that processes are aligned in time in Kaizen. They're aligned as they happen in real life. And there is a kind of critical path to them, where the branches and the side chains and the components and everything needs to come in. And that's not dissimilar to a construction process. That's not considered particularly different to any general project process, whether it's project management, whether it's prints or whichever system you're using. Essentially, you are setting up the critical path of the processes. And then for each of those processes, what you're actually going to do is build a frame. So, okay, how do you build a frame? Well, the most important thing in any Kaizen process is the people. They don't have to know anything, but you have to know what people are involved, because again, from the original statistician's point of view, knowing what you don't know is important. It's not knowing something isn't important, but knowing what you don't know is very important to this process. You also want to know what's constraining you. So what are your budgets, your resources, your people resources? And you want to know what the current metrics or measures are for this process, if they exist at all, or if they're fit for purpose. You then need to look and define the training path to achieve the quality circle. And if you're an individual by yourself working on a single project, you then are only looking at training yourself, but you still need to do it. And then you focus on the team skills and figure out what you need in the center for the team to function if you lose one, or you lose two people, or you replace them, or they move around. So you've got this kind of sustainability in the process itself. Next, you benchmark your current position. You define, essentially what you're doing is you're defining relevant statistical control points and the current metrics of how something is performing. It's quite simple. And then we start into the real parts of Kaizen, which is you define the frequency of your meetings, your agenda. You flatten out the hierarchy and make it task-based. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. And you set the date of your first brainstorming session. At that time, you literally need to trust an incremental approach. Rome is not built in a day. And the fact is that you are going to address all the issues in the meetings themselves. So you don't need to particularly worry. All you need to look at is your process and say, I'm going to change it. What you do need to worry is you need to worry about how you're going to bind the change of that process in time. How is that? How are you going to control the time of this changing and this planning? And how long will you give yourself to do it? And the final stage is to rank all of the processes that we saw in terms of how difficult they are to achieve, how relevant they are to do. So getting a little bit more graphic, when you do that, you can see that what's going to happen. This is a Kaizen process as we model it out. We've built our frame, let's say. We've put in that information that we were looking at. And now we want to make the problem visible. And because we have those metrics developed, because we have the statistical ability to look at a process, we can then make the problem itself obvious. We can come in and we can say, here's what the problem really is. Look, it's this number, and we want this number to be improved. And we want it to be improved over this time. And naturally, by setting the numbers correctly, you can set the objective correctly. That's the statistical part from way back when in the 1920s when it started, coming all the way through to here so that you've got control. You then in your team have your brainstorm to see what potential improvements you can actually make. What can we really do? What can we actually attain? And then you look at putting a little bit more meat on the metrics and defining a workflow amongst the people that you've got so that you know what you're about to do to achieve what you hope will be your goal. And then you do the work. And at the end of it, the point is that you are only going to implement those things that are successful, but you'll document the things that fail so that you get some value out of it. And again, I'll return to that a little bit later on. So what I want to show you now, that's very quick, 26 minutes. It's a bit dry, but I want to show you what leather looked like in 1996, the production of leather as a question across the whole world. And if you look at this, the first thing that will stand out in terms of environmental protection or making things better is that the loop itself, the production loop, isn't closed. And you've got to remember, this is 1996. There's no such thing as ESG at the time, or it's just in its very, very early development. There's no circular economy. There's no real concept of sustainability. And I wasn't applying environmental principles to this process particularly. I was simply looking at improving it because I had started to be aware that perhaps as a sheepskin merchant, I should know the effect of the products that I'm selling. That was just becoming the idea at the time in England, that you should actually know about your effect on the environment. What you can also see is that there are a lot of process centers here. There's a lot of places where different industries function. So if you start at the beginning, it's a field, okay, so that's a farmer, and the farmer is farming animals that then go to a slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse will separate the meat from the skin and hopefully do that in a good way. Obviously, there are issues around that, human issues, social issues, cruelty issues, all sorts of things in the slaughterhouse, and they don't stop as you move around the process. So you go from the slaughterhouse, the skin is preserved with hopefully just salt and boric acid, but they do tend to use PCP. You then move it to a tannery that's using sodium sulfide, genetically modified enzymes, ammonium salts, all sorts of things. It then comes in mechanical processes after you've tanned it, then you dye and finish it. And of course, there are heavy metals in that process. There's phthalates, there's solvents, and then you take it to a sweatshop where children make it, or the production system isn't at the same level as you would expect in your own country. And remember, this is 1996, and pretty much nobody is really worried about this stuff. It's just becoming into the bottom end of CSR. And the other problem with it is that the money is actually, the money supply, particularly from raw material, is moving through a trading house, the Bin Laden trading house. And of course, within another 5 years, everyone will know that name and what money was being put to. So just let me go back there, and I'll just say there are a lot of processes there. There are, in terms of making a shoe or making a leather product, there are about 400 processes there. So it does take a little bit of time to work through them. If I fast forward you to 2008, this is where we kind of ended at the end of the financial crisis. So the chemical and the biological wastewater treatment plants were recycling and producing organic waste, which we didn't have to put into landfill. The biogas plant was planned but not built. The fertilizer factory wasn't built, but we were using the offcuts as hang tags and promotion in American retail. So we were selling our waste as a hang tag, and it grew flowers. So that was kind of fun. At the slaughterhouse and in the fields, everything was certified organic, from under the animal's rearing itself, the slaughterhouse, and the way we were working with the Humane Slaughter Society. The preservation had gone back to salt and boric acid. And then if you look through the tannery, every single chemical used in the tannery, dye, every process that we used was certified organic by the Soil Association. And it's easy to make claims like this, and it's easy to say, I made the first traceable system, but traceability is a requirement of the organic certification. And it's a little bit more difficult to get hold of one of these. That's actually the certificate at the end of the process, which I'll explain about it a little bit later. But that certificate that you see there is the largest collection of certified organic fashion goods ever assembled. And it hides a secret. It hides a Kaizen secret. And I don't know if you can see the cursor or not on this. If you can't, if you look down the list carefully, you will see that there are component parts to things and things. So changeling's made of pig skin. You can see there's denim and cotton in there. You can see there's lambskins. There's leather boots, which are made of component products. There's cowhides here. And then there's voile, which is a cotton product. There's denim, as I said, over there, and there's rib. So what we had done is we'd taken the actual production system to pieces, put it back together, and over 12 years, just to get you and give you an idea of this, it took 2.5 years to get the raw material sorted out. We'd re-engineered the entire leather supply chain, simply taking it one process at a time, putting the right team together, figuring it out, and making changes. So Kaizen works for environmental changes. It works particularly well with people who aren't educated. I've used it in Africa for projects down in Africa. And I think in terms of industry, Toyota using it, the example I've just given you, is proof enough that the system actually works. But what I thought, Romana, would be more fun was what else can it do? We've got a whole lot of people here. Is there anything that the German Society would like to run through as a fun exercise?
Yeah, I mean, Greg, this is really nice. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen for now, that we see we are still here. Everybody's still here. So yes, I will start and maybe encourage my colleagues here to do the same after. You said that this Kaizen works with everything, right?
Absolutely.
Everything. So I have two things. Obviously, German Society is now, we've been running like online for about 2 years, right, Walter? Is it? You're mute, by the way, Walter. Walter, du bist stumm.
Yes, since 2020, I believe.
Yeah. Well, almost 2 years. So we are doing well, but how could we improve? Let's say 2023 is coming, new year, we have again our agenda. How can we use Kaizen to improve? I don't know, to attract more people, to attract different types of people, maybe, I don't know, that. So that's more professional. And the other one, that will be maybe a bit ridiculous, but let's see what you can come up if this is actually possible. It's New Year. New Year 2023. We also start thinking about our personal lives, health, and so on. And one that comes really often is, okay, in January, I will lose 10 kilos. How can I apply Kaizen to that?
I love it.
First, important improvement, German Society. Then, not so important or equally important, but different measurement, 10 kilos less. How can this work?
So which one do we want to do? Do we want to throw it out to the audience and do weight loss, or do we want to do improve, or do we want to try and do both in 30 minutes flat?
No, we need German Society first. It's priority, and then we can do the other one too.
So right, let's have a go then. What's the first thing we do? We line up the processes, don't we? The first thing we do is lay out processes. So what are the processes of joining the German Society? Do we have a membership committee? Is it held somewhere else? What's the process? If I don't know you, but let's say I suddenly decided, what I must do is join the German Society. How would I go about it?
I think, but you did, and Walter can help me. I think first thing is you have to become a CO member. Okay, because otherwise you would hardly even know that we exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to be CO member, you have to, you know, fulfill certain criteria. It's not when, yeah, you have to have certain criteria, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then this takes some time, and then you are, you know, at Seoul, and then you start discovering all these opportunities which organization offers. And one of these are also societies like German society or some other societies. There are plenty. Yeah. And then you have to find out when the events are, and if you are ambitious, you can join the committee. If you don't have time, you come like, you know, you're our guest. So that's, I think, how it works. Is it correct? It is, isn't it? Yeah. Mhm.
An interesting process
I think,
indeed, where you have.
Walter?
my understanding is that you have to be a CIOL member
Yeah.
in order to join. Otherwise, you would not have the access and not the knowledge about the existence of the website of CIOL, and you find then the event section there. So my understanding is the process is that you are interested in what is going on every month, that we meet every month and we prepare.
Mhm.
And I remember then when we started, we were six persons who tried to prepare it, and now we're two or sometimes three or four. Yeah. But the process is the meeting every month, nearly every month.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's very interesting. At the beginning, I thought it applies only to production, to manufacturing something. But I'm getting more and more curious that it can be applied also to other processes. And this is something new. And also, I would like to ask, or to improve my understanding, that you said you can enter, you can embark that process at any time. Usually, when you gather people, when you try to find people who are active, who are making a contribution to some process, then you choose them due to their knowledge, to a certain level of yes, knowledge or experience. And this is something new to me now. So you understand?
Yeah, it's very interesting how
I'm swimming in that new feeling of having heard something new and interesting, and I'm very curious.
It's a very interesting about face, isn't it? Because the philosophy of Kaizen is continual improvement. So if you adopt the philosophy correctly, then of course, if you can improve the selection of people to start with, you will. But if you can't, you will learn how to train them. So they will become better as you come along. And the idea of that, if you go right back to World War II production, was that a whole lot of women came into the workforce who had never touched the production line before. Remarkably, they outproduced the men. Now, how did that happen? Because of all these men working all the time, of course, knew absolutely everything. And all those women knew absolutely nothing, which is wonderful if you're teaching new technology that nobody knew 6 months ago. So all those men with those preconceived ideas in the factory that have grown over 40 years, or, oh, I didn't do it like that with my dad, were completely antithetical to process improvement. And all those women said, oh, great, I'm going to help the war effort. Finally, I can help my man at the front by getting that gun out to him as quickly as possible. We're all positively motivated to learn these new systems as quickly as possible so they could help their chaps out at the front. So in fact, what you had was an uneducated workforce being far better and far more adoptive and quicker than the educated workforce, because the technology was changing faster than any of them could keep up with. So now you come back to the situation today, Walter, and you say to yourself, my God, digital marketing, which we'll come back to, Romana, and I'll have a little look at that in a second. Isn't that like it is today? Don't you have to redo your certification with Google every year? I mean, is any of that digital marketing the same today as it was 5 years ago? And now you're looking at who's the expert and who's not, and in what situation. So you've got this train the trainer element of Kaizen, but you've also got train the untrained element in Kaizen. And it's really in the control of the what you will call, I won't call him the Kaizen master, but you understand it's a project manager, as to what the blend is for any specific task of what you would actually want to understand to make improvements. And I would suggest, if we took the example, and I'll bring it straight back to Romana, I would suggest if you wanted to improve your membership or the number of people attending here, you would have as many people from the society as a group, as an audience, and you would have a group as organizer, and see what the experiences of the audience were, and see what the experience of the organizer was, and learn how you frame both those things. Why did, I mean, Daniela, why did you come to the German Society tonight? What was it about it? You're obviously a member of SEOL, I understand. You have the criteria, but why did you come here tonight? And I would get all those experiences from all the audiences as quickly as possible from a team of, I'm the audience, great. I want feedback at the end of every meeting from the audience. I want to know why they came. I want to know what they liked about this. And I want to know if they're coming back. Those are my 3 things that I would want to capture from my Kaizen process to frame it. And I would put a score on it so that it's a statistical analysis, and I would literally score the talk so that I know what my catchment wants. From
you have a question here from Carolina.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't have the chat up, but go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you. Well, I believe, and I raise my hand because this is the first time I have been a CIOL member for just like 2 months, perhaps, or something. I just got into it because I wanted to present the cert funds. As a matter of fact, I'm Colombian, and my pair is English to Spanish. So, and I'm learning a little bit of German, but es ist sehr schwierig. Aber, but I think that, to be honest, I'm like an outsider anyway, so I'm really new to this group. And I honestly don't know what your society does. It is not stated in the CIOL. I don't believe that I am a user, let's say that, okay? It's like, so I don't know what you do. I don't know what societies do. Like, for example, I don't know, Portuguese society, if there is one, or the Spanish. I honestly don't know what they do. And I found this webinar because I saw the coming events, and I know a little bit about Kanban and I'm sorry, Kaizen, and yeah, Kanban is another kind of thing, but I'm interested in knowing about all of these things. Honestly, it was like a coincidence that you are the ones who are promoting this event. But honestly, I don't know anything about my host. So maybe if you want to talk to me later after the webinar or anything, to ask questions about what people like me, if this is what, if people like me is who you want to capture or enroll, because I don't know what you do. So maybe maybe you don't want me because I'm not a German speaker or something. like later. I know that this for webinar, I am your people, but
No,
maybe for the other
Carolina,
things, I'm not. So
Carolina, we love everyone. We are very happy when people come here. Yeah.
but
And I think
you know what I mean.
I
So
do.
with
And I think
the
what you're saying is actually highly relevant, because if you look at the situation that you described, there's a criteria that you must meet to be a member of SEAL. So there's the catchment, there's the audience. You can't, if that's the catchment, that's what it is. It doesn't mean it's good, it doesn't mean it's bad. Kaizen doesn't have good or bad. It has, do we improve or do we get worse? Simple. And if we get worse, we document why we got worse and we say, oh, I learned something. And if we get better, we say, oh, brilliant, I got better. So there's no
Yes.
negative in that. And what I'm trying to say to you there is that's a very relevant opinion. Where I would start the first process for the German Society would be the interrogation. I don't mean the word directly, you must tell me. I mean the understanding of why the members of the German Society come to these lectures and what they get out of them. Because then I could go out to the rest of SEAL and say, hey, look, we really enjoy doing this at the German Society, which would, of course, attract more people like yourself. And ultimately, I get the process building on itself. And I would try that. So I'd try to interrogate myself. At the next one, I'd try and present the German Society this system as what we like to do in the German Society. And maybe we would get more people who aren't in the German Society coming along. If we did, we'd try and refine it again. We'd try and make it more relevant to the audience, because this is a SEAL audience, it's a closed audience. So you're really trying to capture market share. I know that's a horrible way of looking at it, but that's what you're doing. There is a market, it's a defined members of SEAL. You have to decide as a German society what it is that you want to achieve. Now, is it all German speakers or is it a wider audience? That's an internal matter. I make no comment either way. But once you look at yourselves and say, this is what we want to do, and you do it as a committee, you do it regularly. So you have these two people, organizers and audience, and you rate things and you say, that's what we want to do. Marvelous. Now you can take that out to the wider audience and you will have consensus inside your group, which will give you consensus outside it. Why? Because you're all in SEAL. So what else do you do in SEAL? When you're talking about SEAL, you talk about the German Society in the same way. And that consistency of message will give you momentum inside the society itself. If it works. If it doesn't, you try another set of processes and you carry on. But to me, looking at what you're doing, you start with yourself, you start with the catchment you have available, you take some people in the audience and you say, listen, would you mind being my focus group, please, for those first 5 lectures of next year? At the end of it, the focus group scores the lecture according to what they enjoy, because these are voluntary societies. You're not ordering anyone to do anything. There's no financial concern, I think. So you do it according to what you actually enjoy, and then you universally promote what you enjoy. And you just score it so that every time you get a better score, you go, wow, that was a good one. Let's do more of that type of thing. Let's encourage our members to enjoy the things they enjoy already. Marvelous. And then you're looking at speaker choice, you're looking at subject choice, and you're basically, you're essentially setting up a feedback loop with numbers. And that is a Kaizen process. And I think that's as far as I would go within the SEAL question, if that's all right with you, Ramon, because I think it's enough for you to go away and think, and we can talk about it later.
No, that's really very interesting approach. I mean, it's very logical, you know, especially when somebody says, listen, do this, this, this. It's, yeah, why didn't I think about that before, right?
Well, that's the mistake a lot of people make. You're not in Kaizen doing that. That is non-Kaizen. I am here now. This is what it is today. I benchmark today. I am not in the slightest bit interested in the past. I am here now, and I need to make it better tomorrow. If I make it worse, oh, that's all right. I learned something and I'll try again to make it better the day after. But if you waste your time trying to change the past, you will never change the future. It's an absolute waste of time. You can't do it. It will afford you nothing. You will just simply have a big row with people about how they remember the past, because we all remember it differently, how they were affected by the past in a completely different way to the way you were. And you'll just go around chasing your tail, achieving precisely nothing, because you can't improve the past, but you can, with Kaizen, improve the future. And that's very fundamental to the idea. So you don't beat yourself up for making mistakes. You do not beat yourself up for not knowing anything. You celebrate the fact that I now know what I don't know. Ah, excellent. Now that I know what I don't know, I can educate myself about the things that I don't know, and I can be better tomorrow. So you see what Kaizen is doing as a philosophy. Do you see where it's going? It's a very nice philosophy, because you don't have to be well educated. You don't have to start in the right place. Things can be going terribly wrong, like the world's environment, for example. And yet, if you just simply do things better day after day after day after day, you can have some security and some positivity in the daily process. And the ultimate result must eventually be to come to where you want to be, because you have to keep improving every day. So might be a while. I mean, that process took me 12 years. But in the end, it was certified organic leather. It was beautiful. It was sold all the way. We even had Pink wearing it at the MTV Awards. So you come to the place where you want to be simply by improving at your own rate, if you like, at your capability and your achievable rate, with just a little thing at a time, and not worrying about it too much, because you can do, and most people know what they're capable of doing. Most people also know what they need to do to get better, which is a nice segue into your second question, which was, how do I lose 10 kilos?
Yeah, please. We'd like to know that too.
This is going to make Kaizen is not step change. So you are not going to lose 10 kilos. You're going to lose 1 kilo 10 times. Okay.
More realistic, isn't it?
How are you going to lose 1 kilo? Very interesting. A theory most of us would know: eat less, exercise more. Over what period are you going to lose it? Well, you can lose it in a day if you don't eat anything, you don't drink any water, and you run around. There's a kilo loss. But can you do it again? It's unlikely. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to, for example, go for a 2-mile walk, or I am going to do a little bit more exercise, and I'm going to eat a little bit healthier, and I'm going to do that every day for a month. At the end of that month, you might have lost 200 grams, and then he would say, okay, it's going to take me 5 years to lose the 10 grams, which isn't going to work because Christmas is coming in a year. You say, okay, I've now got to walk 4 miles every day and continue to eat healthily. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the amount of exercise that I'm taking every day, and I'm not going to change anything else at all. Nothing. I'm going to have my life exactly as I like it, but I'm going to add some exercise in. And to lose 1 kilo in a week, you will need to do 10,000 steps a day, which is a nice long 5-mile walk. If you want to continually do that to lose 10 kilos, just keep doing it. Keep your calories as a woman around about 1,800, and that will do it. And the reason I know this is because people have asked me before. You asked me a very simple question. So how does the process work? Well, I'm the committee and I know what I don't know. Well, I don't know how much exercise I need to take. So I just start off doing a little bit. And then at the end of the week, I monitor to see if I've lost 100 grams, no grams, gained grams. If I've gained grams, I'm not being honest with myself, because I've exercised more, I've eaten the same. Something, I'm not going to gain weight by doing that. So clearly the point is that it is a statistical process. So I weigh, shall we say, 90 kilos. That's my start point. I want to get to 89 kilos, and I'm prepared to put in X amount of effort every day, which will mean I can do this walk, I can do this exercise every day. At the end of a week, I monitor. At the end of 2 weeks, I see how I'm going. And if I've achieved my result anytime in between, I carry on. And if I haven't, I simply take and add more regular exercise. And I guarantee you, within 3 months, you'll have lost 10 kilos. How about that? Good answer, bad answer, we like it, we don't like it.
I'll ask our colleagues here who can, you can unmute yourself and maybe you can ask or say how you enjoyed the talk or if you have any thoughts. Yeah, just feel free to say.
Of having a survey after one of these sessions is an excellent one.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think we should do surveys. The thing is that we are, Seoul is very careful, of course, with the data, so GDPR. So I don't have any contacts, basically. I mean, just those who are like my friends, colleagues who are close to me, those I have, but not of everyone. So this would be something to share with our, organizers who.
Yeah, but then you can do it on the basis of interested parties.
Correct. 100% correct. And it's voluntary. And it's interested parties, and it's a score. You're just going to score them to help you. You'll define, and I'm sure amongst yourselves, you'll come to the criteria that you want. But remember, the purpose is for the German society to improve its offering to itself, so that it can then define what it itself enjoys.
Yeah.
So
you don't need to have any personally identifiable data within that survey.
You don't need it. There are 10 people, they score it however you want to. You don't need personal data at all. It's a number. You don't need people's names. You just need people. You could put it in the chat at the end. If you had the right questions, you could get the right answers. So again, you're starting this process by looking for the questions that would define how the German society likes the German society to be and how lectures help that. And I think it's a place where you then have some strength in then going back into SEOL or any umbrella group and saying, well, look, we're just trying to improve ourselves. What's the problem, right?
Yeah, but may I ask, what kind of question would I then ask? Because I can create a poll.
If it was me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy the talk today? I would have, do you feel the talk today was in keeping with the best interests of the German society? I would have, was the speaker understandable? That's a good one, always. And I would have one text box, if I could, which was, given the speech today, what do you feel, or what would you think would be a good carry on of the issue if we were to carry it on, if we were to series, or instead of just one speech, if it was a series of speeches, where would it go? What would be of interest to us? Obviously, all the functional stuff, all those rules you've got seem to work absolutely perfectly. You've all been incredibly well behaved, and thank you for keeping silent during the speech. It really makes life much easier when you're talking, and I have done this very often, so it is a genuine thanks, because we have people all the time who interrupt and and it becomes very difficult to get the real the dry stuff, the stuff you have to have. Like, the history isn't exactly phenomenally interesting, but if you don't realize that there were 4 processes at the start and they morph, it's very hard then later to apply this idea correctly. So it's hard when you make a speech to try and get the right things, but thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, so does anyone have any question or feedback for our speaker today? Like always, we share that.
That was very interesting, and thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Walter?
I told you before that it's a really huge surprise to me to hear and to get in touch with such a method, or with this theory, or how you call it. And I myself, I try to continue being interested in that. Can you recommend a book, or are there websites?
There's an entire organization for
we
it,
can
called
continue
Kaizen Institute, and it's a bit, again, it goes a bit dry in terms of the bit where you're interested, it's very interesting because you require to answer your questions, you require to be quite a high level of understanding for it, because it's the acceptance of the current position that is at the heart of improvement. It's the understanding and acceptance of, oh, we don't have an expert at that, so we've only got two choices. We get one in or we educate one. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't have an expert for that, we can't do it.
So Greg, you mean Kaizen Institute, United Kingdom, that one?
Yeah, no, they're all over the world. It's the
Yes.
Japanese guy, Misaki. He's
Yes.
still the president of it. He brought it back in '86. It's still the same book. It's still the same thing. Everyone who does it actually has their own kind of theory, unless they're locked into that, and they're locked into that in terms of liability and production if they are actually implementing that very specific form of Kaizen. But for Walter, if it's in the process side itself, there's a lot of stuff on the internet. Not all of it's accurate, but it's, I would, because it's a combination of theories. I'll send the pack back to you, and you can have a look at the various bits and pieces and the books that went into it. And as I say, you can read up more about it from the Institute itself.
Yeah,
I really wonder why I haven't heard about this. I was connected, and I worked for a lot of big companies, joint stock companies and so on, and they had a very active human resources staff and management staff. And is that more or less confined to the Anglo-American sphere, or?
Yes, I mean, I think you're correct. And the other thing is that it was more prevalent in the late part of the 20th century, and is less prevalent now because we've destroyed language. So you can see the PCDA system is used in software, but nobody knows it came out of Kaizen. Nobody knows what the Toyota production system is anymore because they don't learn it. They learn the Gizmo system on Udemy, and they don't understand there's 100 years of building of this philosophy out of America through the military and into Toyota, which is what made Japan the industrial complex it was. But Japan, remember, in the end, became a stagnant economy. So when they stopped adopting it, Japan stopped using Japan, an American development after the war, it fell out of favor. It was very, very strong in the 90s. It was very useful for environmental work, but there are consequences to lining up your processes, Walter. The world should have been saved years ago, because the technology has existed for at least 20 years. And if I was the first person to put a traceable system in 2004, we were able to do process improvement, things like HACCP. We were able to do organic. We were method biological. We could look at any process and optimize it for its energy, for its finance, for its efficiency, really from about 1950 onwards.
Greg?
So, yeah.
Also, Judith has one question here.
Sorry, yeah, I'll just finish that with Walter. So, Walter, the question is not why isn't Kaizen well adopted? The question is, why is Kaizen avoided? And it's avoided because you line up all the processes and you expose it to activism. Because as soon as you make something transparent, for some unknown reason, activists attack you because they can see you, but they don't attack the one they can't see. So there is an underlying problem with activism, because it attacks what is the people trying to make the changes, because they're exposing the problem. And activism went spectacularly wrong in about 2000, when the NGO started to cozy up to the corporates, and the people literally started attacking entirely the wrong people. So you'll find in England, I can't drive to work because somebody's blockaded the road. Yeah, of the people driving on that road, I'm one of the people who changed an entire industry or gave it the opportunity to change. I don't really feel that I'm the problem. I think it might be the oil industry rather than me. Could be. Don't
So
know.
it feels very uncomplicated and flexible instead of being rigid. And
Yeah, that's right. And that's the thing. And but what it does is expose everything. So it was, if you were looking in 2004, traceability, transparency was everywhere. Everyone was going to be traceable. Everyone was going to be transparent. Everyone was going to improve the process. The world was going to be saved. In 2008, oh, hang on, where's the money gone? No, we don't want to show you any of that. We can't change. And they started making the excuse of scaling. So we can't do this change because we can't scale it. In other words, we can't exist as a corporation if we make this change because we can't keep our market share and deliver better products to the customer. That's really just after the financial crisis. And it's taken another 14 or 15 years for them to realize that actually they better start doing something. So I think you'll see Kaizen type processes coming back now, particularly in areas where, I mean, I think they've got some real problems in the fossil fuel industry they could have solved if they wanted to. I think you'll see them start to solve them because they're not that intractable. It's just a carbon capture, or it's
very
just,
interesting. And we're lacking time for that. But anyway, okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry, there was a question. Yeah, we are. Maybe another day.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it very short. It's been absolutely fascinating, Greg. I've learned a lot. I come from I use my languages in a management and business background, so I have a lot to do with internal companies and politics and processes. And I think what my takeaway from this is, and what I really like about it, is because of process and statistics, it's a very objective conclusion. And you probably, I'm sure everybody knows as well, in companies, it can become very personal, depending on whether the management likes a particular person, and then they can get all sorts of issues. And I think if you have a management who is prepared or committed to using the Kaizen, then it can be a much more fair and equitable approach to running a business. So that's what I've learned about it, unless I'm wrong. Just wanted to thank you for that.
You're absolutely spot on. And it is the formation of the team that's at the heart of the success of the process. You notice I was very clear about saying, I don't care who's in the team, because either I educate them or they already have the skills to get to a quality circle who is able to address the issue that I'm dealing with. And also, if you look at the basis of this, the ownership of improvement stays with the employee that improves it. So it gets rid of empire builders. And if I was to further your comment to say, yes, how right you really are, I would say the loss of the employee furtherment in industry is catastrophic for us as a group of people, because unless you can give ownership to the person who actually makes the change, your office politics goes off the scale, because people realize they can actually abuse each other and use them and get away with it. And in the reason Japanese culture adopted this very successfully in the start was because it was exactly the reverse of what they had before. Before, they had an emperor on top, a higher class, and you all worked. Suddenly, if you made the change, you were the important person. You were the champion, you know, in the Japanese culture. So you were lauded and you were seen as a very important person in the company because you were affecting the change. Now, you were still a worker, but you had the kudos to go with it, and your manager simply couldn't take it, and they were trained not to take it. They were trained to promote you, not them. And that's the training of the trainer. So you're absolutely right. When it is put in properly, not only do you teach the team how to behave with each other, you also put in the statistics so that irrelevant conversations that are of no interest to the business whatsoever are also filtered out really quickly, because you're going to ask, how does that improve the situation? It's a very simple question. And it's a lovely Kaizen question. How does that make the world better? How does that make this business more profitable? How does that improve anything? Oh, it doesn't. Well, there's a lesson learned. Keep your mouth shut next time. And it's again, it's funny, and I'm trying, I make you laugh a little bit, but it's very important to understand that this process has been around for a very, very long time. And it's not gone forwards recently. people are back to kind of empire building. They're back to not onboarding their colleagues correctly. They're back to not really respecting, and they can get away with it now, particularly through remote, because they're not actually face to face with them. And I would say now it's much more important that you set your team correctly, and you set your task correctly, and you quantify it correctly, so that you can get rid of all that stuff. So yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely spot on, actually.
Greg, there is Carolina has a question.
Sure.
Well, this is for specifically what you were talking about with Mr. Walter Kromick. This is weird for me because I think that it's more prevalent, call it Kaizen or some improvements, other methods of improvements, but I have known about this, and this is on a daily basis, used on a daily basis. And look, I think that it is used daily on the aviation industry, and hospitals, clinics, healthcare has copied a lot of what the planes industry, the plane industry does in the sense of security, or for the sake of patient security in the clinical field. And honestly, this is done every day in clinics and hospitals. Yes, also in the aeronautical industry, but it's prevalent, really.
No, it's parts of it are. The adoption of it is kind of widespread, but the adoption of the word is much more widely adopted than the adoption of the actual philosophy. And I'll give you an example. In the planes industry, the Boeing 777 is a very good example of a Kaizen process that was short-circuited for money. It wasn't followed, it was ignored, but they were in a Kaizen process. I would not dispute with you that they were doing it, that they were working through the system until they realized they had a problem, and then I would say to you, look at Volkswagen, and Volkswagen, who faked environmental data where they were in a Kaizen process. So I'm not disputing with you that there isn't the prevalence of the word Kaizen. It's more prevalent than it ever was. But the actual application of the philosophy, the rewarding of the individual worker, the setting of the team correctly, the promotion of safety over profit, I think it's all gone backwards. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be negative. And I agree with you, in clinical terms, we've come forward in leaps and bounds by the people who are actually doing it. And yet, if you were sitting in England with me, who can't go to his doctor because I need to wait 5 months, and if you'd been with me in the hospital where they dropped me in an operation, so I spent time really recovering for, I think, 7 days in a very intensive situation for an appendix, I'd have to say, I agree with you on paper, but do people actually understand the philosophy? Do they actually understand how it should be applied correctly? And are they applying it as Kaizen, or are they applying it as fiduciary duty of the director to the shareholder?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're not the same thing. So I agree with you. The people that are doing it well are doing it very well. The people that are doing badly are doing awful and shouldn't call it. And then there's a whole lot of people who are suffering a technological change at speed that would benefit from giving themselves a break, not thinking that they can understand everything in a day, just doing a little bit more learning every day. One day I'll get there, but oh, the technology's changed, so I better start learning again, so that they don't have this constant stress all the time of having to have arrived before they've set off. And it's this new world where we're, oh, look, here's a new app, you have to know how to do that. Well, I don't know how to do that. Well, you have to learn. Well, I haven't learned before, so what do I do now? And it's an exclusionary system that we look at, because you don't even get a handbook for a lot of things these days. You're just given it. You're supposed to understand it. There's no I go from not understanding, oh, look, I don't understand that. Fantastic. I know I don't understand it. How am I going to learn it? Oh, I get the handbook, or I get the training course, or I get this, or I get that. There's no deep learning into people today that's actually the most normal thing in the world. You not knowing something is the norm in our world. It's not the exclusion. Almost, I mean, you know almost nothing, and take out Google and see how much of it you actually know. So it's a very interesting thing that you're bringing up, because yes and no, it's the same as a lot of words. A lot of words don't mean what they used to mean.
But I think this would also mean that this is that the directive system, which is applied nearly everywhere, is waning, is getting reduced, and this is a danger to management staff.
I
to
agree.
directors and to supervisors, unless they have a different attitude to that. But you cannot expect them to have it. At least, I think, not in our country.
No, and I think you're right. And I think if you were to apply what you're saying, and you go back to what I was saying in the lecture, that in fact the Toyota production system was a lean system, just-in-time delivery with automation under a Kaizen management philosophy. What happens if you take away the Kaizen management philosophy and you're left with a lean system without enough stock in your supply chain and automated processes that no one can intervene with?
But this breaks our traditions, and the traditions are very rigid, and they are also connected with influence and with
and what happens is
personal powers and so on. I think
exactly
okay,
you go back to feudalism very quickly.
A lot of doubts are rising in myself now.
Well, you see, the point about it is that when you see what's happening with supply chains now, you can absolutely know that Kaizen's been turned around on its head. I'll give you a very good example. We can't get eggs in England at the moment, and the news will tell you that it's due to avian flu. It's not. We've had exactly the same amount of avian flu this year as we had last year. What's happened is the supermarkets, in anticipation of the price rises from the farmers, have already put up their prices. But just at that point where you would think they were going to have to pay those prices to farmers, someone's come along in England and said, oh, no, we won't do that. So the farmers had a price rise. They'll have to sell their eggs at a loss. The supermarket has excess profit, and the farmers have gone, actually, no, I'm not going to sell them to you. And it's just broken. It's just literally broken the supply chain because they were just in time delivery. So they ran out of eggs in about a week. There's no background stock. There's no improvement in the purchasing system that stops it because it's been taken out by people. So end of the day, we have no eggs. We had a strike the other day in England on the trains, and then they called the train strike off, but there were still no trains. How did that happen? No strike, no trains. Well, what do you call that then? Do we have a word for that now in England? I mean, we have delays all the time. We're one of the countries that has the most recorded excuses in the world for their trains being late. We know what it's about, but this is new even to us. Call off the strike and there are still no trains. Surely that's still a strike, right? What is it? So the point is, all I was saying, Walter, is if you remove parts of a system, the system itself collapses. So if you go through continual improvement and you're used to these teams that work together, that make decisions together, if they input automation and they lean down the system to make it financially beneficial for the shareholders, if you remove any of those components, the whole thing just, and that's really what process systems is happening at the moment, in my opinion. And I'm one person, so I could be completely wrong on that one. But in my opinion, when I talk to people, their main problems come from the thought that you can cheapen a system by taking one component out of it in a just-in-time system. And it can't be done. Sorry, go ahead.
We have, so time is running. So let's take Julie, and then we will slowly wrap it. Julie, please.
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
Everything you say, I agree with everything you say. I actually belong to the Green Party, and I can just imagine taking that back to them, and they would agree with lots of that. I mean, shareholders are just, you know, if you're trying to please shareholders, it messes up the whole system. So
Well,
all I'm saying is I agree, and I would love to sort of try and use it within my Green Party. But I mean, a lot of Green Party, my local Green Party, is about, you know, having an even floor. So
yeah, I mean, it's actually codified into the law, strangely enough, that should happen. The fiduciary duty laws of the director do not allow for the improvement of the environment, and that's going to be really interesting. They do allow for the reduction of energy, so they can look at reducing energy in the system and therefore making more money for the shareholder. But the fiduciary duty law is a fascinating thing in a developed economy, because the vast majority of the shareholders in companies today are pension funds.
yeah,
So who owns the pension funds? That'll be the pensioners. Who are the pensioners? We are.
Mhm.
And they're acting in our interests? Really? Are
Well,
they really acting in our interests?
we fought. I mean, I was a teacher, and we actually fought for our pension fund not to be done that way, and it's been taken out now because we felt strongly about it.
Yeah, and then they brought in something called ESG and scorecarded everything of no value to anybody. But it's essential. I mean, ESG is fine, but it does have terrible economic consequences on countries and banks and everything else. But you're absolutely right in terms of looking at green and looking at environmental protection and looking at how things have progressed. We had the solution, and we still do. We just need to change the law a little. We don't really need to do great deal of activism. We just need to open the director's viewpoint to protecting the general public as part of what they do, and put personal liability back on them if they don't. And it's very simple. It's not even a big change.
We don't have the will here.
We just don't have the political will.
like
No,
Germany.
it's not just here, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. They don't have the political will anymore to do very much, because they're operating in a more globalized environment. Therefore, then they're less representative of the nation of citizens at the moment than at any time they've ever been. And they would say, yes, but that will make a better world and that'd be good for everybody. It is an argument, but it's an argument that seems to be proving not to work. And that's very interesting, because you have all these kind of anti-nation state. Oh, being a nationalist, that's terrible. Loving your country, you awful person, right? And yet we talk about local accountability as if it's the most important thing in the world. And we talk about, having access to power as being very, very important. And yet we very easily give it away. So it's a really fascinating world at the moment. Nobody knows how it will turn out, but it's very difficult in terms of looking at, and I'll just in terms of that change I was making when I took it to Marks and Spencer's, who we did sell to in the end. It was, I can't put this in my shop because it will show up all the other products as being bad. And yet with JCPenney, we had to put a different label on it and promote it as them being the first to do something, and then that was good. And what you found is the approach of people varied on their own personal perspective. And of course, from a person who's looking at Kaizen and saying, look, this is better. I'm not saying it's fantastic. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm saying inside, this is better, and it will be better tomorrow, and it will keep getting better. These sort of immediate things where people, I must do this and I must do that. And it's like, oh, step change doesn't really work with people. So it was fascinating taking that project around the world and selling it to people, and and the idea of it and how it worked, and showing off at shows and having fun. But it always came down to the executive and their risk appetite at the time. And of course, once you hit 2008, there is no risk appetite. There is none. It is over. We cannot show what we're doing because we will lose what we're doing if we do show what we're doing. So traceability, which you would have had on a chop in Sainsbury's in 2004, is gone in terms of all things other than you get a code and a website to market to you. Whereas before you could actually see what the processes were happening. And in our case, you could see it almost in real time. So it's very interesting, but a very complicated subject when we get down to that level of it. But thanks.
Yes, so Greg, thank you very much. I will now just, as always, we have to, promote and complete our, German Language Society here. That's pretty much how we always end. So we had conversation, feedback we will collect. Thank you for your advice. Just short for those who are our, members here or joining Walter and I, we have 5 events planned. They are, at the moment, they are all German ones. So in January, I wanted to do I'm Remarkable, which is a Google initiative, which actually helps, to promote yourself better. But I had to put it in German. So ich bin bemerkenswert. If there are, people from, who don't speak German that well, we can still change it into English, on spot. In February, we are watching movies or films, Deutschstunde. März, we will start with March, we will start with travels. So Hamburg, die deutsche Stadt des Cafés und Tees. That's something that Walter will tell us all about. Coffee is very important. Product, let's say, in northern Germany. April, we are starting with Stadtgänge or, actually just city visits. It's the Hansestadt Wismar mit Walter. And in May, it's Graz. That's my city, which I miss and like. And I have here like Schmelztiegel der Kulturen. So it's kind of melting pot of cultures. So that's what we have for now. Then, as always, you have to go through Eventbrite, or you can write me and I'll somehow try to make sure you get invitations. Here's my email address, romana.suster@gmail.com, if it's something that you would like to say directly to me. That's our Gummibärli. Always thank you for being here. So we have our Facebook, we are on LinkedIn, and we have YouTube. So I'll cut a little bit this presentation and you can then watch it on YouTube as well. And then I thought, okay, it's the last event. I know it's maybe too early, for these Christmas wishes, but I really, really like that one, which says, a Keksel a day keeps the Weihnachtsstress away. Means a cookie per day, keeps you away from the Christmas stress. And it's kind of Denglish, German English, but it's really good. A Keksel a day keeps the Weihnachtsstress away. I like that. It's good. And then,
Yes.
of course, more normal one, which is Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I really hope, we will apply a few suggestions. And then thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, welcome.
I think we should really appreciate everyone who has joined us tonight, because we're living in the World Cup game era. So that you preferred to join us, I think, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And
So,
including, of course, first and foremost, Greg.
yeah,
Well,
thank
you very much for listening.
Yeah, and see you again. We'll try to do Kaizen.
Yeah, and look,
Yes.
if you need a bit of advice on it, just give me a bell,
We
Yeah.
hope to see you again in the new year.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, Walter will invite him to our, planning meeting, and then.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
you. Bye. Mhm.